doctors. So we're really proud to tell you that we have been mentioned in the Gartner's new report, which is best practices to maximize the value of digital health platforms. And this is what we wanted to talk to you about today. So my first question for you is, since you've already mentioned that you were the vice president and you also used to evaluate vendors. So what do you think, why is it so important to evaluate different vendors in the market?
I think it's super important. And I think even if you're not necessarily buying products, you should constantly be looking at what's available. At conferences, I always recommend to attendees when I'm speaking to make sure that they do a trip or do a lap around the vendor hall. Because it's important to be aware of what new technologies are out there. And I thought that Gardner made a really good point. They talked about, there's so much expertise out there in the industry, and not to assume that you can create it necessarily internally. Though buy versus build is always, is always something that one should consider. However, there's a lot of expertise, there's a lot of development that's continually going on. And it's I think especially around digital health platforms, it's difficult to find, well, I shouldn't say difficult. I think that a challenge is finding someone that can suit your needs. And so being abreast as a leader, being aware of the new technology that's out there, how it might intersect with what your digital strategy is important, and to constantly be doing that reflection when you're in the market. So that's the thing, right? If you're aware of tools and you're staying abreast of what the latest technology is, then you're sure to represent your company well and stay on top of, where there might be further developments and where you can do things to improve. I've come across companies in my leadership over the years that had very antiquated technology systems that weren't keeping up with the demands or the requirements of what they needed to do contractually, and it impacted their performance, right? So I think it's significant to stay up to date. But the thing is being aware of what's out there. By the time you're ready to do that evaluation, you have a good idea of where to start and what's available. I've seen a lot of great tools over the years, and when you first see them, it's shiny and new, and the technology is super exciting. But I think you have to get away from that kind of starstruck phenomena and have an opportunity to really think diligently about what your company needs and what the longer strategy is. And so as a leader, I know going out and looking at platforms, I might evaluate 16. There was one time that's why the number is there. I looked at 16 different platforms to try to determine what was right. And some folks might say, well, that's a waste of time. You should have been able to get it down to, X number. But I thought that was important, that I do that and educate myself and understand, what was out there, so that I could find the best product for what my business needs were at the time.
Wow, Doctor, 16 is a huge number. So So what were some of the most important factors that you looked at, and what do you think is actually the most important factor when you're choosing a vendor? Is it the price? Is it the product itself? Or is it the strategy?
It's always gonna be a blend. And that's the thing. I think that, you need to sit down and think about what you're trying to achieve. I've been in positions where we didn't want to spend a lot of money up front, but we wanted a tool that was usable by by who the end user was going to be. And so we knew who was going to be interacting with the system. We needed something that was a little bit more simplistic of a tool. The price point was lower. It maybe didn't have all the capabilities of some of the more expensive systems out there, but it fit where we were at that time. And so when I'm sitting down and thinking about, where I want to spend money, there's a few things that come to mind. So I'll tell you kind of what the big ones are, but they can shift in priority depending on what it is that I'm trying to do. And so one of the things that's paramount to me, and I say this all the time, is relationship. I want to make sure that whatever tool that I'm choosing to use, that I have a good relationship with that team, that they're going to hear the things that I need, and be flexible. You need to have a good partner. And I think, Gardner mentions that too about, I know relationships are important, but just the thinking around, having that transparency, having that good working relationship, because every company's needs oftentimes are different, or you need, some modifications and some tweaks to get it to work in a way in which, you need it to. Price is important as it, relates to budget, but I wouldn't just take that as, I'm price sensitive. And so, this is what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with the cheapest tool or the most expensive tool. I think that further evaluation needs to be done there. Really think about, and again, I know Gardner mentions this too, and I agree, these were things that I was thinking about too, or as I think about when I make recommendations to clients of what to purchase is, where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Think about the investment that you're making. Because if you're making a significant investment, you want a product that can grow with you. And that goes back to too, what I was saying about partnerships. You want a product, right? And you want the, the, the people that are invested in that company to be similar to you. And so are they developing? Are they keeping up with the times? Do they have your company's best interest in mind? What are they doing to keep current? And so, those would be things that I would look at. And again, I would want to look at when I'm investing monies, what's the return that I'm going to get on the investment? How long do I think that investment's going to last me? And is it going to prove itself or be worthwhile in 3 years or 5 years? And I also don't want folks to think either that, because I've seen this as well, where folks will invest and buy a very expensive tool, and then find that, it doesn't suit their needs for the long term. And that's something that I would, caution against as well, is that, you know, um, again, those huge investments, you want to make sure that that tool and isn't obsolete, right, in 5 years or 10 years, and then it's continuing to work with you. And so sometimes, investing, in a tool, maybe there's components of a tool. So if you're truly price sensitive, there might be components of a tool. Think about what the capabilities are around your organization. Maybe they can't handle. Maybe the new system will interact well with other systems that you have in place. So there's lots of things that should be going through your mind as you're thinking about and making decisions about where to invest your monies, especially as it relates to digital health platforms. And again, I think, making sure that you're working with the right people, that have your best interests in mind, that they're flexible and easy to work with, is one of the most important things. And then I would build around it, right? The capabilities of how are they staying up to date? How are they pricing things? How do you see that working out in the long term? And so, again, lots of components that go into that, but really thinking about where your organization is, what your immediate needs are today. But then again, thinking long term as well. I know it's very confusing, but just a lot of things, to consider. And like I was sharing, it's not just about the short term and the here and now, but thinking long term as well.
But do you think that data management also plays a key role when you're selecting a vendor?
Huge, huge. I got excited when I was reading about Gartner and the data management, and I think that that's huge. And just a few things to mention there. So we know, right, that there's been incidents, some rather large, publicized, took down the healthcare system for a significant amount of time, issues with data mismanagement, I should say. I think data management is huge. I think there's a few things to consider there too. Um, whether or not the group is able to manage the data, meaning be able to read the data, know how to store it, know how to categorize it, is extremely important, especially in digital health platforms, because when you're bringing all that information together, it can be interpreted a lot of ways. You want to make sure that the information that you're bringing back, or the ultimate message, right, that it comes up with, is lucid, and is actionable. So I think that that's important. But then data storage as well. You want to maintain the integrity of that data. We know in the work that we do around value-based care, you hear stories all the time about, truncated member IDs and just things getting discombobulated as they transfer data back and forth. And so good stewards that can manage that data. I think the other thing that Gartner brings up is that a lot of folks are HITRUST certified. That's a given for me. I would expect someone to have that. But again, it's not enough. You want to make sure that they have data governance. And again, going to that partnership, I think having that governing body where you're meeting with them on a regular basis, and your organization, right, is doing good due diligence around the governance of your data. And so having a committee that meets regularly to talk about what the foci are for your company around data, and then how that data is being managed, who has access to it, how it's being used. I've seen that a lot of times where, in organizations where folks will take data and they don't really necessarily understand how to read it, and they interpret it one way, but that really wasn't the appropriate message that they should have gotten from it. And if they knew, the background of the data, they would have had a different interpretation. And so, you want to be aware of who has access to that data, what hypotheses, how they're using that data, and, whether or not it's with fidelity, as you would expect from your organization. The other thing too would be, the management of data and who owns the data. And I thought Gardner brought up a really good point about this, and it reminds me, it takes me back 15, 20 years. I remember developing a website with a company and, who owned it. And so I think there's something to be thought of there too. When you're evaluating those vendors, who's storing the data, where's the data being stored, the cloud. I know years ago, and I've even come across some people even to this day that are skeptical of the cloud. However, I think that, cloud-based platforms provide probably the greatest security and the greatest flexibility, and the greatest storage capabilities as it relates to data. But then again, who owns that data? Do you get that back? Do you have access to that data? Say if the relationship with the digital health platform that you choose doesn't work out. What happens to that, and who has uh, the ownership of your data that they potentially have in that platform? Where's it going? Is it being mixed with other data? How's it being used? Are they selling it to others? So these are all types of things and questions that I would be thinking about, that I think is an important consideration when you're thinking about who you're going to partner with for your digital health needs.
Thank you, Doctor, for telling us about the importance of data management. I also think that it is a very, very important thing to consider.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so my next question is that Gartner wrote that organizations can benefit from the expertise and innovation of DHP vendors while minimizing the management overhead of on-premises systems and infrastructure. Vendor dependency is an opportunity to leverage the best practices and solutions of a trusted partner. I wanted to know if you agree to this statement and if maybe you can add more to it.
Sure. So DHP, digital health platforms, I do think that, again, it goes back to that build versus buy decision. And I think that healthcare and healthcare data is so complex that to build something is very challenging. Just having the expertise that's needed to continue to build upon those skills, especially when you're trying to manage other parts of the business, can be very challenging. And so I do think that it's one way in which you can scale pretty quickly and add that capability to your team. And I know that a lot of companies are choosing to go that way, where they're, bringing in expertise where it's needed. And I think that that's one of the benefits of working with a digital health platform. that's been developed right outside of your organization. But then, you have the ability to leverage those capabilities and they're keeping up to date. It doesn't mean that you don't still have to have some of that capability in-house, but more from a management function. So, you would still need to have that oversight. You would still need to have some awareness because by all means, and I think of it like, taking your hands off the wheels, if you will, or off the handlebars when you're riding a bike. There's all sorts of things that could happen, right? You could end up off the road and in an accident. So you always want to make sure that you're involved in providing that oversight. But I think that, this gives you an opportunity to plug in and maybe it's a full scale suite. Maybe it's just a few components here and a few components from that vendor. But it gives you an opportunity to choose things that are right for your company. And then the other thing that's nice too is that you're not so invested oftentimes that you couldn't divest yourself if you needed to or wanted to at a future date because you wanted to use a different technology or maybe there's something that's more advanced and so you'd have the ability to change. And so I just think vendor solutions give you a lot more flexibility. Again, it's not that you don't have capabilities in-house. It's just that maybe you don't have those capabilities in-house. You still want to manage it. But again, it gives you the opportunity to bring in, I think at a much lower price point, that expertise and use it in a way that benefits, the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I think this concludes our session for today. Thank you so much for telling us how to choose the right vendor and what are some of the important factors. So
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you.